Welcome to stage 19 of Misspoke, a cycling podcast going out during the period of the coronavirus pandemic, which we seem to be coming to the end of. And Misspoke is a collection of pieces around cycling culture, cycling and other bits of culture. And I'm going to start off stage 19 with the final sections from my novella about the Bastogne Liege sportive, which is called The Monument, and we're up to chapter 17. "We're not far from the tunnel," said Clovis. "How do we play this?" "Just be ourselves. Remember, we don't know if we're carrying anything, so if we've got no reason to feel guilty." "Of course we're carrying something, and I always feel guilty. I have a guilty face." "No, you don't. And stop worrying. They're not looking for two old geezers in a stonking red Mazda coming back from Bastogne Liege with the doors and a Pearson on the roof." "How do you know?" "They're looking for stowaways or Muslims in pyjamas with big bushy beards." "That's racist." "Not me. Look, we'll be fine. Middle-aged, middle-class, white, well-spoken, polite, nothing to worry about." "I hope you're right." They stopped at the automatic ticket barrier while the camera scanned their number plate and issued their hanger for the crossing. "We've got about an hour," said Clovis. "Let's get a coffee." There was no blue Skoda in the car park and no sign of their bikes. Inside the terminal building, Clovis queued at Costa Coffee and bought a coffee, a packet of crisps, a ham and cheese croissant, and while waiting at the till to pay, added a chocolate brownie. "You hungry?" said Eric. "I'm nervous. I always overeat when I'm nervous." "You'll get fat." "I'm going to look at the duty-free," said Eric. "You know it's not duty-free, don't you? It's cheaper in Sainsbury's. Why don't you wait until you get home?" "You can't get a giant Toblerone in Sainsbury's," said Eric. Clovis munched his way through his croissant, crisps and brownie, and then wandered around W.H. Smith looking for cycling magazines. Walking back to the seating area, he saw Wolfie and Smack just leaving the terminal, with big Burger King paper bags in their hands. Eric came back with a carrier bag with a giant Toblerone sticking out at the top. "What?" he said. "Nothing. Let's go." Next they stopped at passport control. The French side didn't look at their passports and waved them through. They pulled up to the barrier of British passport control. Clovis handed their passports to the agent. "Take off your sunglasses, sir," she said. "Sorry," said Eric. "Where have you been?" she said. "Liege, Belgium," said Clovis. "Business or pleasure?" "Pleasure," said Clovis. "We're cyclists." "Really?" said the agent. "You don't look like cyclists." "Thank you," and she waved them on. A customs officer pointed at them and beckoned them over to a covered area. "Turn off your engine, sir," he said. "Is there a problem?" said Clovis. "I don't know," said the man. "Should there be?" "Not at all," said Clovis. "It's an expression." "Step out of the car, please." Clovis and Eric got out of the car and stood to the side. As they did so, a blue Skoda drove past them with two bikes on the roof. Their bikes. "Where have you been?" said the man, walking around the car. He was a heavily built man with bushy eyebrows and a beard. He didn't look very friendly. "Liege," said Clovis. "Belgium." "I know where Liege is, sir. And what were you doing there?" "Cycling. Liege, Bastogne, Liege." "That was on Saturday. Today is Monday." "I know." "So, what did you do on Sunday?" "We went to watch the pros race." "Really? And where was that then?" "Stavelot." "Ah, La Redoute." "No, La Redoute isn't in Stavelot. We were on the Côte de Stocco." "Were you indeed?" "Don't you believe me?" "Why shouldn't I believe you, sir?" "No reason." "These your bikes, are they?" "Yes." "Both of them?" "Mine is the Dawes. The Pearson belongs to my friend." "This friend?" "Yes, Eric." "Took them out, did you?" "Yes," said Clovis, "on Thursday." "Take them down from the car, sir, if you would be so kind." Clovis opened the clips holding the bikes and lifted them down and put them on the ground. "They're not locked?" said the agent. "Isn't that a bit risky?" We keep an eye on them, said Eric. Always? Asked the agent. In Stavelot? Yes, said Clovis. Bit difficult that, isn't it? I imagine you didn't park on the Stockholm. Well, not in Stavelot, no, but they were locked then. Ah, that would explain it. Got any tools? What sort of tools? Said Clovis. Bicycle tools, Allen keys, stuff like that. Clovis had a Lausanne porter shop in the boot, a nicely designed, rather expensive travelling toolkit which he kept in the car, and which contained most of the cycling tools one might need for repairs or adjustments while travelling. Here you are, said Clovis, holding it out to the agent. Oh, you're the expert, I'm sure, said the agent. You do it, if you wouldn't mind. Remove the suit post from the Pearson. Why? Just do as I ask, sir. Eric was standing with his arms folded. Mine is the Pearson, he said. Let me do it. He took the Allen key from Clovis's trembling hand and removed the bolt and pulled out the seat post. Came out very easily, didn't it, sir? Said the agent. Turn the bike upside down, would you? Eric lifted the Pearson by the handlebars and the seat stay and slowly turned it upside down. Nothing fell out. Now the doors, said the agent. Yours, I think you said, sir, he said to Clovis. What are you looking for? Said Clovis. It's not what we're looking for, sir, said the agent enigmatically. It's what we find. There's nothing to find, said Clovis. How do you know, sir? Because it's my bike, said Clovis. But it was out of your sight, wasn't it, for a few hours? In Stavelot, wasn't it? Yes, but what, sir? You did have these bikes in Stavelot, did you not? Yes, said Clovis. Of course we did. I'll be back shortly, gentlemen. You can wait in the car. Neat colour, by the way. Thanks, said Clovis. The agent took each bike by the handlebars and walked with them between him and disappeared around the corner. What do you think? Said Eric as they sat in the car. Shh, said Clovis. They can't hear us. I don't trust them. They know something. No, they don't. You think they do because you're nervous, so you read more into his comments than are really there. They're looking for something which they know is there, or they think is there, because someone told them to look. Who? Who just drove through while we're being searched? Our old friends, Wolfie and Smack. They've got the dirty bikes. We've got the clean bikes. Don't you see? We're the diversion. We get stopped, so they get through. Very clever. You mean we're the smugglers who aren't smuggling? We're really innocent, but we think we're guilty. Is that it? They haven't found anything, have they? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't bringing back. Maybe it was delivering. But we haven't done that either. Haven't we? We delivered our bikes to Liege, didn't we? And then we delivered them to Stavelot, without realising it. Maybe that was the delivery. Maybe whoever took them was supposed to take them all along. The agent returned with their bikes. Sorry to have kept you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. You may go. Thank you, said Clovis. Quite heavy, aren't they? They're steel, said Clovis. That's why. Not like these new carbon bikes. No, indeed. I have a giant myself. They put the bikes back on the roof of the car and drove on. Clovis drove under the high barrier and joined the queue of cars waiting to board the shuttle. At the head of the queue was the blue Skoda, with their bikes on the roof. Part 3. England. Chapter 18. They drove off the shuttle and headed down the road, remembering to drive on the left, which Clovis often forgot until cars came toward him on his side of the road, flashing their lights and shouting at him and waving their arms wildly. The speed limit was 50 miles an hour most of the way back, on account of preparations for the M20 to be used as a car park in the event of Brexit problems. We made it, said Eric. Don't count your chickens, said Clovis. This is just the beginning. We're not finished yet, not by a long shot. We've still got to get rid of these hot bikes and get our pay. But they're not hot, are they? Said Eric. They didn't find anything. Didn't they? What do you mean? Why did he take the bikes away and then bring them back? What did he do with them? You're paranoid. You know what they say? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that your bikes don't contain contraband. Do they say that? I've never heard that. It's an expression. I just made it up. You've seen that motorbike before? What motorbike? It's behind us. Been there, off and on, since Brussels. Why haven't you mentioned it? I forgot. Let's finish the job. It was gone 6:30 when they drove off the shuttle, and it was just after 7:45 when they drove up to Jay's and around to the back. There was no one there, and all the cars had gone. They unloaded the bikes and found a combination lock wrapped around the metal shutter that covered the back door of the cafe. They unloaded the bikes and left them leaning against the shutter and attached the combination lock and spun the wheels to engage the lock. "I'll drop you at home," said Clovis. Eric didn't live far away. "Cheers, mate," said Eric, when they had finished unloading his gear. "Thanks for the driving." "It's cool," said Clovis. "Good trip." "Remember," said Eric, "what goes on tour stays on tour." Chapter 19. Clovis drove up to his house and parked the stonking red Mazda in the driveway. "Hi, darling," he called as he unlocked the front door. There was no one in the house. He walked through the empty, silent rooms. All was neat and tidy, everything put away and not a speck of dust anywhere. It was like a show home. In the kitchen there was an envelope on the table with his name on the front. He sat down on a chair and opened it. Inside was a photograph of him and Jordan on La Redoute. He turned it over. On the back was written, "Thanks for a lovely night. Sorry, Jordan." There was also a piece of paper. He recognised his wife's handwriting. "Don't bother trying to explain. I'll come back when you're no longer there." "Shit," he said. Chapter 20. 2 days later, Clovis and Eric met at their usual place to go for their ride. To make a change, it was warm and the sun was shining. "Usual?" said Eric. "Guess so," said Clovis. "We're going to Jay's, get our money." "That's the plan." "You spoke to them?" "No, I had a note through the door." "Oh." They followed their usual route along the lanes and the Pilgrim's Way, past the fly-tipping dumped along the verges, past the rapeseed fields and the lavender farm and the ramblers rambling, through the little village with its neat cottages and its wary inhabitants, past the other cyclists out for their daily rides and the rumbling 4x4s hogging the roads, up the long hill with Eric still huffing and puffing behind, and lastly, arriving at Jay's just as before and parking round the back. No sign of the Pearson, or the doors, or the combination lock from a few days earlier. But there was a motorbike parked there. "Gentlemen," said Jay as they walked in, "how the devil are you?" "Good," said Clovis. "2 coffees, please." "Good idea," said Eric. "I'll have 2 coffees too." Bill sat at the table with Steve, who was eating a bacon sandwich. There was no sign of Bob, or Wolfie, or Smack, or Jordan, or Chrissy, but a man in a purple Lacoste shirt was sitting in the corner. There was a motorcycle helmet on the chair next to him, and a leather jacket was hanging on the back of his chair. "Join us," said Bill. He handed them each a large brown padded envelope. "Don't open it here," he said, "but it's all there." "Can I ask a question?" said Clovis. "You can ask," said Bill. "I may not answer it." "What did we do?" said Clovis. "You did your job," said Bill. "That's why you got paid." "What was it? What did we bring back? Or what did we take?" "You remember that Sky story?" said Bill. "The man who delivered an envelope but didn't know what was in it. Said he was just the delivery man, just did his job." "You did your job. But don't ask too many questions," said Eric. "Smart man, your mate," said Bill. "If we need you again, we know where to find you. Remember that. Jay, get me a coffee. There's a good fellow." You've been listening to The Monument, a novella about the Bastogne sportive. That was the end of the story. If you'd like to hear it again, or if you'd like to read it, you can buy it from Amazon, either as a paperback or as a download for your Kindle. And now to continue with my autobiographical memoir, My Life in Bikes, and we are coming soon to a close as we reach 2016 and a Mason definition. The Roberts was seldom ridden on the road now, and I found a new use for it when I discovered Zwift and loaded it onto the Kicker turbo trainer. Carbon bikes are not recommended for the stresses and strains of a turbo, particularly when using Zwift and sprinting or getting out of the saddle. Moving the frame from side to side while it is locked into the turbo puts a strain on the carbon, which it could do without, but the Roberts was ideal. Patches in the paintwork began to appear where the sweat stained the finish, and some of the components were looking the worse for wear. But it did the job admirably, and the broken-in Brooks saddle made for a comfortable perch while sweating away in the garage on winter evenings. The Planet X had long since been dismantled back to the frame, and its Shram Force group set sold on eBay for reasons that now escape me, so that was no longer in use. The Cervelo came out for those times when I felt like going fast, and the Boardman was lent to someone in the club whose own bike was damaged, and he raced it until it was ready to fall apart. So the Endurace got a lot of use. In April 2016 I was due to retire, and like everyone felt that I deserved a new bike as a retirement present. This surely would be the forever bike of which I had dreamed for so long. Out came the magazines and the internet surfing for some furious research. I was tempted by a Trek and a Cannondale, but decided I wanted something a bit different. Mason was a new British brand that was making waves and getting recognition, Bike of the Year contenders, etc., and one of its bikes had been ridden by Josh Ibbett to victory in the transcontinental race. Was it time to resurrect my plans to ride around the world? No. But it was time for a new bike. Mason had been started by Dom Mason, a designer who had worked for Kinesis amongst others, until setting up on his own with two bikes, a steel bike called Resolution and an aluminium bike called the Definition. I'd had carbon and aluminium and titanium and decided I wanted a steel bike back to the days of the Roberts. Mason was based on the south coast and offered test rides. Now that I was retired, the days of mail order could be behind me. It was a warehouse unit on an industrial estate, and there was Dom and another man, a couple of desks, an Apple Mac and bits of bikes lying around. It didn't look entirely prepossessing, but Dom was friendly and had a Resolution I could take out for a ride. I rode down to the seafront and along the coast road to Brighton Pier and then turned around and came back again. I liked it, but Dom also had an aluminium Definition available, and I thought as I'm here I might as well try it. I preferred it, a bit lighter, a bit sharper, a bit faster. I placed an order. As this was to be my forever bike, yeah, right, I went for Shimano Duo Ace Di2, electronic gears, and it came spec'd with hydraulic disc brakes. The first time I would have ridden disc brakes on my main bike, the Canyon Inflight, was a winter bike. The standard wheels were by Hunt, another new British brand getting good reviews, and they were designed for tubeless tyres, another first for me. And so I sat back and waited for the build to be ready. It was a couple of months before it was ready, and I drove down to Worthing to pick it up. It was a beauty. Dom had chosen photography-based names, so the colour was lens blue with an aperture fork, and the paintwork gleamed. I took it home and went for a ride. It was and is sublime. Beautiful to look at with understated graphics. Fast, comfortable, efficient, smooth, eager. Perfect for long days in the saddle, but if you wanted to get up and go and put the hammer down, it was happy to oblige. There was a fabric saddle and white fabric bar tape, Adidas stem and handlebars, and a 50-34 crank. As a final retirement present to myself, I had it fitted with climber shift buttons, 2 buttons mounted on the handlebar near the stem, which allowed you to change gear while climbing or whenever you couldn't be bothered to shift position to the brake hoods. The Mason completed the Raid Pyrenees, west coast to east coast, in 100 hours, including the Col d'Orbisque, Porte d'Aspet, Peyresourde, Aspin, Tourmalet, and then the Italian Dolomites, including the Passo Giao, Passo Pordoi, Campolongo and Falzarego, and then to Bormio for the Stelvio, Gavia and Mortirolo climbs. It also conquered the Sanglé de Ventoux, 3 ascents of Ventoux on 3 different routes in 12 hours, and performed perfectly throughout, with the disc brakes perfect on the long sweeping descents and the 12 to 32 cassette helping me up the climbs. I also rode it for 150 miles on the Amstel Gold Sportive, and it was comfortable and smooth throughout. Marin mountain bike, 2017. In September 2016, my friend Ian Bashford, known as Bash, was killed while taking part in the Duo Normand time trial in Normandy. My club, the Old Portland Cycling Club, had been sending teams to this event for a number of years, and I took part from 2012 onwards, first riding the Cervelo and subsequently the Boardman. It was a two-up event, meaning that riders rode as a pair, and it was a UCI event with world ranking points, probably the only event where amateurs and professionals could compete against each other on the same course on the same day. It was a 34-mile course over rolling countryside, starting and finishing in the small village of Marigny, not far from Saint-Lô. Ian Bashford was a passionate time trialist who competed throughout the season, and so his attendance at the Duo was regular, and his times were excellent and much, much better than mine. We really enjoyed the weekend, catching the ferry from Portsmouth to Caen on the Friday, riding the course on the Saturday, competing in the event on the Sunday, and catching the ferry back on the Monday afternoon, after a morning spent discovering the beaches and monuments of the Normandy landings from 1944. In later years we rented a large barn conversion for the weekend, and up to 16 Old Portlians would descend, representing one of the largest British club contingents at the event. The course followed a route out of Marigny and then curved round in a loop back into the village, before heading out on a 5-kilometre section to a roundabout, turning around and then coming back on the same road. This meant that riders were travelling in both directions on the same stretch of road. There were cones between the two lanes, but for much of the road they were far apart. One of the unusual and popular aspects of the event was that each two-man, or two persons, as women and mixed teams also took part, team was allowed to have a following car, just like a team car in the Tour de France. There was no requirement for the driver of the car to have any sort of experience, and nor was there any check on whether the driver even had a driving licence or was familiar, if they were British, with driving on the wrong side of the road. During the 2016 event, Ian Bashford and his partner Peter Gray were returning back into the village of Marigny and were less than 400 metres from the finishing line, moving downhill at great speed when a van, following two riders going out of town, decided to overtake some other riders. The van drove into the opposite lane, straight into the path of Ian and Peter. Peter managed to swerve to the right and avoid the van, sustaining minor injuries, but Ian took the full force of the van. I was taking part in the same event with my partner Michael, and as we headed out of the village some 10 minutes afterwards, I saw someone lying on the ground in an Old Portlian's jersey. Michael and I stopped and found Ian lying in the road being tended to by medics. He died at the side of the road without regaining consciousness. Ian was a brilliant car and cycle mechanic, and his garage was a treasure trove of his passion, but it held too many memories for his wife, and so she asked Peter, my friend Simon, an old friend of Bash's in the club, and me to clear it out. We decided to throw away what couldn't be used or recycled, and have an auction for club members where we would sell off his tools and bikes to raise money for his family. As part of that auction, I purchased Ian's old Marin mountain bike, which he used to undertake chores and shopping trips. I stripped it down, refurbished, cleaned and polished the components and put it back together, as good as new, and then sold it on to another club member, Ian, who wanted to use it for mountain biking through the woods around West Wickham. Carlton Corsa Strada, Holsworthy Keep and Claude Butler, 2017. In early 2017 I did a 1-week cycle mechanics course, hoping to learn how to strip down and rebuild a bike and maybe get to a point where I could buy a frame and components and build it all up. I wasn't a very good mechanic. Going back to school after so many years was hard. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and it never was, and I've never been particularly dexterous with my hands. But I persevered, and it taught me a lot, even if the instructor was a tosser and got on my nerves. The Eroica events were becoming popular. They had started in Tuscany in Italy and included a rally and sportive with a retro theme. All bikes had to be pre-1987 with toe clips and no electronic gearing, and the cables had to be exposed and couldn't be routed beneath the bar tape, which was common on modern bikes. And the bikes had to have toe clips. No look, time, Shimano or Speedplay clipless pedals were allowed. My plan was to buy a pre-1987 steel bike and strip it down and refurbish it, either to sell it to someone who was looking for an Eroica bike, or maybe just use it myself and ride the event. The bike shop advertised a steel bike on their Facebook page, and I went to see it. It was a Carlton Corsa Strada from the 1960s. Steel, obviously, and a beautiful bronze gold colour. It was gorgeous. I'd never heard of Carlton, although some swift Googling soon filled in the gap in my knowledge. It seemed there was a whole subculture of Carlton fanatics beneath the rock of the internet, just waiting to be discovered. I bought it, stripped it down, cleaned and polished everything and put it back together with new bar tape, toe clips, cables and a chain. It was stunning. But once it was finished, I wanted another project. I found a Holdsworthy Keep on eBay in classic but chipped Holdsworth orange, put in a bid and won. I picked it up from an elderly man in Surrey who had had a fall on it and was giving up cycling. I did the same to that and was becoming an expert on stripping bikes, cleaning and polishing components and rebuilding them. I then went back to the bike shop and they had a Claude Butler touring bike, steel again, in a pale powder blue, and I had to have it. But then I stopped with the steel bikes, until the next one. It wasn't long before the Cervelo and the Canyon were gathering dust in my garage. I took them out occasionally so they didn't feel too neglected, but they weren't getting the use they deserved. I decided to sell both and buy something else. I looked around and went back to the magazines, but there was nothing that I felt that I had to have. There was a Giant, which got good reviews, but I never really wanted a Giant. I knew people with Colnagas and Pinarellas, but they didn't really do it for me. Someone else I knew had a Ridley and swore by it, so I went to see Maurice Burton again, who said Ridleys. However, the fast Helium SLX I wanted wasn't available with disc brakes, my new favourite, and the trade-in I hoped to get for my Cervelo foundered when I couldn't get the offer I wanted. So then I had a brainwave. I would keep the Canyon, which I liked, but swap the group set from the Cervelo, sell the Cervelo frame, which was now just too stiff and unforgiving for an old man like me, and the Chorus group set, and have an Endurance Canyon with a top-level group set. Sorted. I did that, and now the Canyon has Super Record on it. Although it still doesn't get much use, the Mason is my go-to bike, the one I reach for when I'm going for a ride, the one that's always ready for me, the one that begs to be ridden. I sold the Chorus group set on eBay and got a good price for it, but the Cervelo frame on eBay did very poorly, and in the end I sold it for 160 quid, a criminally small amount of money, although it went to a good home. I still have the Boardman, but I rode it at the Duo Normand in 2018 when it poured with rain, and the Zip carbon wheels with a carbon brake track are a complete death trap in the rain, even with carbon-specific Swiss stop pedals, so that's going up for sale. I decided to build up the Planet X with some bits I had lying around and a new Shimano 105 group set, and put that on the turbo. So it was time for the Roberts to go. If I had plans to go around the world, which I didn't, but still, I could now use the Mason. I took it to the bike shop to see if they wanted to sell it on my behalf, and the owner took one look at it and said, "I really like that." "Go on," I said, "you know you want it." He ummed and ahed, and they had it in the shop for a few weeks until I popped in and managed to persuade him to buy it, which he did, and gave me a good price for it. He took it to Vienna, where he lived most of the year, and a few weeks later suffered a burglary, and the Roberts was one of the things they took. Those Austrians obviously knew a good bike when they see one. And if you see it being ridden around the world any time soon, matte, dark blue frame, Campagnolo group set with Shimano long drop brakes, triple chain set, Brooks saddle, S&S couplings, Harry Rowland hand-built wheels, that was my bike. Give it a wave. Time Izon, 2018. The bike shop that bought my Van Nicholas and built up my Boardman is closed now. Internet competition, high rents, business rates, and a business model that didn't know how to compete did for it after only a few short years. The bike brand they'd chosen to sell was Time, a high-end, very expensive French make, and one of the few to still make its own carbon frames largely by hand, with a predominantly female workforce, and in France, most other manufacturers having farmed their production out to Giant in Taiwan. Alex, the owner, tried desperately to sell me a time, but as you will have seen, I had other brands to occupy my time, and I was suspicious of his sales pitch and never really understood the appeal. But a friend of mine had bought a time from Alex and brought it out in the summer, and I fell in love with it. The carbon weave was exposed and visible through the frame, and the subtle graphics and understated colour scheme was in stark contrast to the expanse of black which was the lot of most of my bikes. But unfortunately I was retired now, and had my forever bike in the mason, so I had to lust from afar. But I did lust. And then the end of the year came, and the end of year sales came, and my luck changed. I used to get an email about cycling bargains, but never took much notice. But one day an email appeared in my inbox, and the magic word time sprang out at me. A retailer had a stock of time bikes which they had clearly been unable to sell, and they were offering them at a massive discount. I clicked on the email, never expecting for 1 minute that they would have the frame I wanted, in the size I wanted, and in the colour I wanted. But they did. God was smiling down on me. Probably for the first time in my cycling buying life, I asked my wife if I could get it, and she, bless her, said yes, and so I clicked the link. It was a frame only with an integrated seat post, and it was rim brake, not disc brake, but at a 65% discount I was hardly in a position to quibble. I already had wheels, saddle and pedals, so all I needed was a group set. I'd been so pleased with the Dura-Ace Di2 on the Mason, but Dura-Ace was too expensive and only provided a slight weight advantage over Ultegra Di2, so Ultegra Di2 it was, but I did get the climber shifters. When all the bits had arrived, I took it to a new bike shop, Panagua in Hayes, and they built it up for me. It was red and black, and the exposed carbon weave was a joy to behold. Time made what they called an active fork. This contained tuned mass dampers, it says here, inserted into the forks, which were designed to absorb and dissipate vibrations coming up through the front wheel. And bless me, it worked. The ride was smooth and fast and comfortable, if anything better than the Mason, although nothing could match the Mason for feeling just right. Had I found my forever bikes? Probably not. After all, I didn't have a lightweight carbon bike with disc brakes, and I kind of missed the titanium, and the new Giant TCR is getting some great reviews, and a fold-up Brompton is always useful, and a Mason Resolution in shutter black is a work of art, and God, that Bianchi was beautiful. Watch this space. And that brings my life in bikes up to the present day. Well, not quite. Since I prepared that piece, there has been a few additions to the bike stable, and I may bring you up to date in the next instalment of Misspoke Cycling Podcast. I'm going to end stage 19 of this cycling podcast with a little short story, a short story. And this is partly about the old Portland Cycling Club and a number of people within the club who have become good friends over the years. Anyway, this story is called A Cycling Story for Christmas. It was a dark and stormy night shortly before Christmas. A group of old ports was huddled around the fire in the Marine Lodge restaurant. Outside, the wind and Lucky howled at the moon. Bash sat contentedly, wisps of cigar smoke playing around his fearsome moustache. Oz was silent in the corner, occasionally tapping his iPad and smirking at pictures of Caitlyn Jenner. Julian sat smiling to himself, clearly amused at his own jokes. Michael and Vino were planning next year's track programme. Tom was drumming on the table. Joe was doing press-ups. Terry, Alan and Clive were telling Uber jokes. Andy was thinking of the fall. Ian was dreaming of Sky. The president was flicking through an Assos catalogue. Bash downed his pint and gazed around the room. This was happiness, he thought. Old ports together, bikes neatly stored, brown sauce consumed. "Let me tell you a story," he said. Everyone stopped what little they were doing and turned expectantly towards him. They sat open-mouthed as he recounted his tale. "It was at 25 on the old A1 course," he began. "I went off early, 6:33, I remember. It was mostly flat, but very windy. It was quite early in the season, but I was going well. I did the first 10 miles, no problem. I was going through a wooded section. There were no cars. My Minuteman was way behind me. My Minuteman was just in front. I came up behind him, and he was riding an all-white bike. White wheels, tyres, everything." "Planet X?" said Julian. "It's not about the bike," said Oz. Bash said, "No, it had no name on it, no logos, nothing. And the rider, he was all in white too. White helmet." "Cask?" asked Michael. "I couldn't see. White jersey and shorts, white socks and shoes." "CD?" asked Andy. "Dunno. No logos, like I said." "What about shoe covers?" said Ian. "Was he wearing shoe covers?" "Listen! Anyway, I looked at him as I went past, and he had no face. There was this white helmet with this mirrored visor, but no face. It was horrible. I could look right through him. Anyway, I went past him and carried on, and then I finished. I did a short 59. Not bad on that course." "Good effort," said Vino. "Who won?" said Ian. "Tadros," said Bash. "Steve Dennis was second, or was it the other way round? One of them, anyway." "What about Warney?" asked Gary. "Dunno," said Bash, lying. Everyone was quiet. "And what happened to the White Rider?" said Julian. "Who?" said Bash. "The White Rider," said Julian. "The point of the story. The Ghost Rider. It was Death, wasn't it?" "Death?" said Bash. "No, it wasn't Death. Death didn't enter. No, it was old Charlie Farnsbarnes. He did a short 53. Bloody impressive." Oz looked up from his iPad. "Bash," he said. "Charlie Farnsbarnes died in 91. He was killed in a crash on the A1. Bash looked at him and said nothing. He removed a cigar from the packet, put it in his mouth and lit it. Outside, the rain continued to fall. That story is in memory of Ian Bashford, who was killed in 2016. You've been listening to Misspoke, a cycling podcast going out during this period of the coronavirus pandemic. Hope you've enjoyed it, and make sure you listen out for future episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've missed any of the earlier episodes, you can find them again wherever you get your podcasts. Take care.